I want to welcome everybody back.
Všetkých vítam späť.
I'm sorry I went over time in our last presentation.
Ospravedlňujem sa, že som šiel tak cez čas v tej poslednej prezentácii.
Give me one moment.
Dajte mi ešte chvíľku.
Okay, so at the end of our last presentation,
Na konci našej poslednej prezentácie,
we were dealing with the issue of, I'm just going to call it cancel culture.
na konci tej našej poslednej prezentácie sme sa zaoberali témou
And I posed a question,
akej kultúry cancel culture. A dal som
if we
otázku,
were worried or afraid to challenge, to disagree with Ellen White.
že či sme sa nejako báli dať výzvu alebo nesúhlasiť s Ellen Whiteovou.
And I think everybody said that they didn't have a problem. They were okay to challenge her.
A myslím, že všetci povedali, že nemajú s tým problém, že neboja sa dať výzvu.
I asked the same question about Elder Tess.
A tú istú otázku som sa spýtal ohľadne staršej Tess.
And I don't know if everybody put their hand up, but the vast majority of people said that they would not challenge what she has taught.
A neviem, či všetci, ale viem, že väčšina povedala, že by oni sa nepostavili proti
They would
tomu,
be
čo učila.
afraid to question her.
Báli by sa ju spochybniť.
So I want to ask a third question.
Chcem sa spýtať tretiu otázku.
Put your hands up if you are afraid to challenge, disagree, or argue against Elder Jeff.
Dvihnite ruku, ak sa bojíte nejako argumentovať alebo dať výzvu staršiemu Jeffovi.
So in all these questions, I'm not saying you disagree with everything that they taught, but could you, if I identified any particular topic,
Nemyslím teraz, že by ste nesúhlasili so všetkým, čo učili, ale či by ste vedeli identifikovať nejakú tému,
that you weren't sure about or that you questioned,
o ktorej ste si nie istí, alebo nejako máte k tomu
would you
otázky,
be
spochybňujete
afraid
to?
to disagree with him?
Či by ste sa báli s ním nesúhlasiť?
Okay, so a couple of people would be afraid to, I don't mean afraid of him as a person, to have a fight with him, but I mean afraid of his position.
Pár ľudí by sa bálo, nemyslím tým ako strach z neho ako človeka, ale báli by sa jeho pozície.
So if he said the bombs are coming to Nashville,
Čiže keď on by povedal, že prichádzajú bomby na Nashville,
would you be afraid to say that's crazy, or afraid to laugh at that, or think it was a
báli by ste
joke?
sa povedať, že to je bláznivé, alebo by ste sa smiali na tom? Báli by ste sa vlastne dať výzvu tej jeho pozícii v tejto veci?
Sorry, you said Christina? Oh, not now.
Teraz už nie.
What about a few months before it was predicted to happen?
Tak pár mesiacov predtým, ako to predpovedal.
Okay, so Christina has been forthright and said before the split in 2019, she would have been afraid to argue against him, but not now.
Takže ona hovorí, že pred tým rozdelením v 2019 by sa bála niečo proti nemu povedať, ale teraz už nie.
Is that because he's no longer in the movement?
Je to kvôli tomu, že už nie je v hnutí?
She's not afraid to disagree with Elder Jeff because he's not in the movement anymore.
Ona hovorí, že už sa nebojí s ním nesúhlasiť, lebo on už nie je v hnutí.
Christina, you also said you're not afraid to disagree with Ellen White.
Ale ty si tiež povedala, že sa nebojíš nesúhlasiť s Ellen Whiteovou.
Is Ellen White in the movement?
Je Ellen Whiteová v hnutí?
Was that yes or no? Or yeah, the movement. Okay, so Christina feels I'm tricking her now when I say the movement. She says this movement or the movement.
Teraz troška ju tak zavádzam, keď hovorím, že toto hnutie, alebo ktoré je to hnutie.
I'm not trying to trick you, but there's only ever been one church on this planet.
Na tejto planete vždy bola iba jedna cirkev.
It just goes through different phases.
Ona prechádza cez rôzne fázy.
So feel free to contextualize what.
Takže cíť sa slobodne to dať do kontextu, čo máš na mysli.
So Christina said Ellen White had the truth for her own time.
Takže Ellen Whiteová mala pravdu pre svoju vlastnú dobu.
Now, don't get me wrong, because I'm afraid of Ellen White.
Nechápte to zle, ja tiež mám bázeň pred Ellen Whiteovou.
It's 1861, and I'm scared of her.
Bojím sa jej, je 1861.
But I don't agree with what she's teaching.
Ale nesúhlasím s tým, čo učí.
And I'm in a movement, and so is she.
Som v hnutí a ona je tiež.
And I think she's wrong.
A myslím si, že sa mýli.
It's easy for me to say that now, in hindsight.
Teraz je to pre mňa ľahké povedať, už asi spätne.
But I've argued way back, I think it's 18 or 19, I didn't clarify the year.
Ale argumentoval som, že v 2018 alebo 19, to som nevyjasnil, že ktorý rok.
The church goes into Laodicea.
Cirkev vošla do Laodice.
Not because the members are bad.
Nie preto, že tí členovia sú zlí.
Why?
Prečo?
You may not agree with it, but why have I said the movement goes into Laodicea back then?
Možno s tým nesúhlasíte, ale prečo som povedal, že cirkev vošla do, alebo hnutie vošlo do Laodice?
Any thoughts? Gloria.
Because they rejected time.
So Gloria said they rejected time.
Gloria hovorí, že oni odmietli čas.
Is that what you said? The point I made is Ellen White rejected time.
Pointa, ktorú som ja urobil, je, že Ellen Whiteová odmietla
She's
čas.
the one that did the rejection. We have evidence of it.
Ona to odmietla, na to máme dôkazy.
And if I stood up in 61 and say, no, I'm a time setter,
Keby som v 61. sa postavil a povedal, ja idem určiť čas,
what would have happened to me?
čo by sa mi stalo?
I'd been cancelled for sure, yes. So I only bring that up, Christina, because it's not that straightforward to just put her as a kind of a legacy issue, because in her history, someone who is thinking can see that she's doing something wrong.
Hovorím o tom, lebo v tých jej dejinách bol niekto, kto videl, že robí niečo nesprávne. A nie je to len téma...
Okay, I'll give an example closer to home.
Trošku to objasním. Dám to tak bližšie k
All
nám.
these shakings,
Všetky tieto triebenia.
I can't remember who did the 2012 one. Who did that one? Was it Aaron? I think.
Kto hovoril o tom 2012?
Kathy. So Kathy mentioned 2012,
Keď si spomenula 2012,
and my name's on there, of course.
tam je moje meno, samozrejme.
So what does that mean?
Čo to znamená?
So here
Takže tu,
in 16,
v 2016,
Tree of Life are against whom?
Tree of Life bolo proti komu?
Christina? Tree of Life are going toe to toe fighting against Elder Jeff.
Tree of Life sa postavil naozaj tvárou tvár
They're saying, "You're
staršiemu
wrong."
Jeffovi a povedali, milíš sa.
They dare to challenge.
Oni sa opovážili mu dať takú výzvu.
And what happens?
A čo sa stalo?
They get cancelled.
Boli zrušení.
So I don't like doing this because it's my name on there. The same thing is happening here. Who is this person fighting against?
Proti komu bojuje tento človek? Toto je moje meno, tak idem o tom hovoriť.
Elder Jeff.
Proti staršiemu Jeffovi.
And who was right?
A kto mal pravdu?
So the point I want us to see
Tá pointa, ktorú chcem, aby sme videli,
is that we go to Ellen White
či pôjdeme k Ellen Whiteovej,
or Elder Jeff,
alebo staršiemu Jeffovi.
and we haven't even tackled Miller.
O Millerovi sme sa ani toho nedotkli.
Who goes against Miller?
Kto išiel
There's a
proti
couple of people,
Millerovi?
you can name one.
Je tam niekoľko ľudí, môžete
shout it out?
povedať niektorých.
Snow.
No,
He is directly challenging Miller.
priamo dal výzvu Millerovi.
And just as it happened in our history,
Tak ako sa to stalo v našich dejinách,
Millers, in the UK we call them your mate, your best friend.
Millerov vlastne najbližší spolupracovník, kamarát,
Your hench person, some people use the term.
proste taký
Who was that?
kamoš blízky.
Who was his right-hand person?
Kto bola jeho pravá ruka?
Miller's. His name's on the chart.
Millerova. Jeho meno je na tej tabulke.
Nice. His PR person.
No.
He says, while you are ill, because Miller's gravely ill, they're stealing the movement from you.
Zatiaľ, čo ty si chorý, tak oni ti kradnú to hnutie, mu povedal.
And who wins the argument?
A kto zvíťazil v tom argumente?
Snow.
Snow.
You might think you know where I'm headed, or you may not.
Možno si myslíte, že viete, ktorým idem smerom, možno neviete.
I'm not really headed anywhere,
Nemám naozaj smer,
but what I want us to see
ale chcem, aby sme
is
videli,
this is not a discussion about prophets.
toto nie je diskusia o prorokoch,
It's a discussion about you
je to diskusia o vás.
and the reason why you remain
A dôvod, prečo zostávate,
when you've got issues,
keď máte problémy.
this shaking that we're in now.
Toto triebenie, v ktorom sme teraz.
And that's what I want us to consider.
To je to, čo chcem, aby
You
sme
may be
zvážili.
wrong.
Možno sa mýlite,
You may have some crazy idea which we will just destroy.
možno máte nejaký bláznivý nápad, ktorými by sme proste úplne zmietli zo stola.
We,
zničili.
the clever teachers.
My, tí múdri učitelia.
Or you may have a valid point,
Možno máte dobrú pointu, ktorá má svoju
in which case
validitu.
we'll just take the big guns out and say, Elder Tess said this on the 2nd of May.
A my vyťahneme veľké zbranie a povieme, ale staršia Tess vtedy a vtedy 2. maja povedala toto.
Now what are you going to do?
A teraz čo?
You've been silenced or cancelled.
Sme ťa utišili alebo zrušili.
And I want us to consider this issue
Chcem, aby sme zvážili tento problém,
because it has all the same characteristics as all these other shakings.
lebo to má všetko rovnaké vlastnosti ako tieto ostatné triebenia.
We spoke about the sin and the sinner,
Hovorili sme o hriechu a hriešnikovi.
and that would go to the message and the messenger.
To ide k poslovi a k posolstvu.
We have to be careful about how we handle those things, because it's really about a message, not the messenger per se.
Musíme byť opatrní v tom, ako zaobchádzame s týmito vecami, lebo je to o posolstve, nie o posloví.
There are different reasons why people remain in this movement.
Sú rôzne dôvody, prečo ľudia zostávajú v tomto hnutí.
Even though they've got emotional, logical, or mental objections.
Aj keď majú nejaké emocionálne, logické alebo mentálne prekážky.
And I think one of the worst arguments we can use
A myslím, že jeden z najhorších argumentov, ktoré môžeme
is to
použiť,
say, Elder Tess said this.
je povedať, to staršia Tess to povedala.
And it's something that we use over and over again. Not because what she said was correct or incorrect.
Nie preto, že čo ona povedala bolo správne alebo nesprávne.
I just want to encourage us, it's just not a good way to behave.
Ale nie je toto dobrý spôsob, ako sa chovať.
Because you fall foul on two issues, understanding and Sophia, wisdom.
Pretože padáte na tých dvoch témach porozumenie a strach alebo múdrosť.
This segment of our discussion
Tento segment, táto časť našej diskusie
isn't so much about what Elder Tess has said or hasn't said.
nie je až tak o tom, čo staršia Tess povedala alebo nepovedala.
It's about how we handle or manage the truth.
Ale o tom, ako zaobchádzame s pravdou.
So how do you know what the truth is?
Ako viete, čo je pravda?
What process do you go to? How do you know what's right and what's
Cez
wrong?
aký proces idete? Ako viete, čo je správne a čo nie je správne?
So if you haven't picked up on it, we're talking about the source of your information.
Hovoríme o zdroji vašich informácií.
And the thing that's in vogue in our movement at the moment
To, čo prevláda v našom hnutí teraz,
is when I share some crazy article,
keď nazdielam nejaký bláznivý článok,
someone's going to say, hold on.
niekto povie, počkaj,
Let's check.
poďme si to skontrolovať.
And my question is,
Moja otázka je,
who checks the checker?
kto kontroluje toho, kto kontroluje.
Because you're going to take me to the media bias website or whatever the correct name is.
Môžeme ísť na tú stránku media bias.
And I'm going to say, I actually don't trust them.
A ja poviem, no ja im budem musieť dôverovať.
Because I know one of the auditors on there personally, and there's a bad person.
Ja nebudem dôverovať, lebo ja poznám z jedného z tých editorov a to je zlý človek.
Because I know how that person treats his wife.
Viem, ako sa správa k svojej žene.
And you're going to tell me,
A vy mi poviete,
I don't care.
je to jedno.
Because Elder Tess said that's our definitive source to define what is a good or a bad source, what's right and wrong.
To je to, čo staršia Tess povedala, že to je ten zdroj, z ktorého máme čerpať na to, čo je správne a nesprávne.
And all I want to suggest
To, čo by som chcel navrhnúť,
is at the very best,
je, že najlepšie
such a tool is imprecise and blunt.
aj v tom najlepšom, takýto nástroj je nepresný, aj taký
I'm
nejasný.
not saying it's not useful.
Nehovorím, že nie je užitočný,
I'm not saying we shouldn't be using it,
alebo že by sme to nemali používať.
but you have to acknowledge it's a blunt tool.
Ale musíte si priznať, že je to taký nedobrý nástroj.
I've seen so many people in the movement use that as a hammer to silence people.
Veľmi veľa ľudí v hnutí som videl, ako toto používajú na to, aby druhých vlastne utešili im. Zapchali
And a
usta.
simple question that I would ask, because I get cancelled, so I don't ask the question,
A mňa tiež zrušia. Otázka, ktorú mňa sa pýtajú,
do you know who finances that operation? Do you know the people who are the auditors who make those decisions and the criteria for doing that?
vieš, kto financuje toto a vieš, že poznáš tých editorov a kto vlastne je za tým?
And I think you do a disservice
A myslím, že tomu robíme takú
to say,
službu,
Elder Tess said that's what we'll use, so we'll use it.
keď povieme, že no, povedala to staršia text, to je dobrý zdroj, no tak to budem používať.
Because next year, when she finds a better tool,
Na budúci rok, keď nájde lepší zdroj, nástroj,
or she finds out about my friend who's one of the auditors who abuses his wife,
alebo zistí o tom mojom kamarátovi, čo je ten jeden z tých auditorov, že sa správa zle k svojej žene.
what do you think she would say or do?
Čo myslíte, že by povedala alebo urobila?
It's obvious she'd say, we'll move on to a better tool.
Povie, no tak sa pohneme k lepšiemu nástroju.
And where would that leave you?
Čo to s nami urobí? Kde nás
When
to
you
vlastne
see
postaví?
how you have handled people, how you've handled this issue over the intervening period.
Keď budeme vidieť, ako zaobchádzame s touto témou vlastne počas nejakého obdobia.
I'm not suggesting we go back to the Wild West and everybody can just do what they want without any kind of control. That's not what I'm saying.
Ja nehovorím, že máme ísť ako na divoký západ a každý nech si robí, čo chce, bez nejakého kontroly a vedenia.
But what I am suggesting is we need to be careful that we don't use tools to destroy people's humanity and their dignity.
Ja hovorím, že my nemôžeme používať tieto nástroje na to, aby sme zničili ľudskú dôstojnosť
and we don't use leaders in the movement or in the cause to do that work for us as a proxy.
A nemôžeme ani používať vodcov a ich mená na to, aby toto dielo robili ako nejaké
If we've
zástupníctvo.
learned anything,
Ak sme sa na niečo naučili,
when the concept of sifting or to use these tools, the thing that we should have learned
v toho procese, toho preosiavania, to, čo sme sa mali naučiť,
is to become intelligent.
je, že sme sa mali stať inteligentnými.
And most of us,
A väčšina z nás,
too many of us, have not
príliš
become
mnohí,
intelligent. We don't use these things intelligently. We just have bigger weapons to hit people with.
príliš mnohí z nás sa nestali inteligentnými, len vlastne sú to pre nás ešte väčšie zbranie, s ktorými ľuďmi potom bijeme.
And I just want to caution everybody that we should be careful how we handle the truth and how we handle one another.
A chcem vám povedať, aby ste boli opatrní v tom, ako zaobchádzate s pravdou a ako zaobchádzate jeden s druhým.
Something that I've mentioned before
Niečo, o čom som hovoril už predtým.
I was speaking to somebody recently,
Nedávno som s niekým hovoril.
and they spoke about Fox News
Hovorili o Fox News.
as, you know, being reliable.
Že oni sú spolahliví.
And I may be incorrect,
Možno sa mýlim,
but the point I was making to this person is that Fox News is the name of the company. It's not the department at Fox.
ale som hovoril tomu človeku, že Fox News to je meno spoločnosti, to nie je akože to oddelenie v tom Foxe.
Because the news department at Fox is reasonably okay.
Spravodajské oddelenie, pretože vlastne to spravodajské oddelenie je v podstate celkom v
Just as all
poriadku.
the other ones are okay.
Ale tie ostatné, tie nie sú v poriadku.
Because when we talk about the news, we're not really talking about the news, are we?
Lebo keď hovoríme o správach, my vlastne nehovoríme naozaj o správach však.
Our problem with journalists
Náš problém s tými novinármi
if we want to use that title,
ak chcete použiť tento názov,
is those who give their opinion
to sú tí, ktorí vlastne vkladajú svoj názor
about the news.
o tých správach.
It's not the news itself.
To nie sú správy samé o sebe.
So our criticism or these media bias websites, what we're actually focusing upon are people's opinions, not the news.
Takže tá naša kritika aj na tých stránkach toho media bias nie je o týchto ľuďoch, ale o tých názoroch, ktoré dávajú k tým správam.
There was an accident.
Bola nehoda.
5 people died.
Zomrelo 5 ľudí.
What news source would you go to?
Do ktorého spravodajstva by ste išli?
It wouldn't make any difference, would it?
To je jedno, či tam alebo tam.
There is no bias in that.
V tomto nie je žiaden taký nejaký
The
predpoklad.
bias comes in trying to figure out why or how 5 people died in that accident.
Ten taký predpojatý názor prichádza v tom, keď sa snažíme povedať, že prečo alebo ako týchto 5 ľudí zomrelo.
And it's that subjectivity that brings in bias.
Táto subjektivita prináša vlastne ten predpojatý názor alebo ten bias.
So I want us to really always bear that in mind when we talk about what your news source is, because we don't talk about a news source, or we shouldn't be.
Takže toto je niečo, čo chcem, aby ste na to pamätali, keď hovoríme o zdrojoch spravodajských.
It's more accurate to say, what's your opinion source?
Nemali by sme hovoriť spravodajské zdroje, mali by sme hovoriť názorové zdroje.
And if we're not clear on that,
Ak toto nie je jasné,
I think we can do a disservice to this movement's message.
môžeme urobiť zlú službu posolstvu tohoto hnutia.
Does anybody have any questions or comments, or feel free to disagree?
Máte nejaké otázky alebo komentáre, alebo nesúhlasíte?
Victoria.
So, in your example with the news, that is just true as it is, just presenting what happened. But then,
So I made the point, Victoria has said, with the news, it's just facts, it's what happened.
Takže ja som vlastne povedal, že so správami to sú fakty, to je to, čo sa stalo.
then commenters make their opinion piece about what happened. And that is considered the opinion.
So a journalist or a commentator will look at that thing that happened, that news, and in their comment, they give a perspective or an opinion.
A potom ten novinár alebo komentátor vlastne pridajú k tomu nejaké komenty a svoj názor. A to je vlastne tá perspektíva.
And so I want to tie that into the movement. I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but it's just something that came to my mind.
So Victoria wants to tie this into the movement, and her point is
That
Čiže ona to chce stiahnuť do hnutia a tá jej pointa je, Victoria,
that leaders in the movement say a truth, and then considering the cancel culture, that someone takes that truth and adds their opinion to it.
so what can happen is, and does happen,
to, čo sa môže stať, aj sa to deje,
is that a leader will make a statement
je, že vodca povie nejaký výrok
and members unwittingly or without realizing,
a členovia bez toho, aby si to uvedomili,
in thinking that they're sharing the news,
mysliaci, že sa zdieľajú o
end up
správy,
actually giving their opinion on the news.
vlastne podávajú svoje názory na tie správy.
And that word news is the message, the midnight crime message.
A to slovo správy, to je vlastne posolstvo, alebo posolstvo polnočného volania.
Now, it's easy for me to say there's just objective, factual news.
Pre mňa je jednoduché povedať, že je len objektívna, sú len faktické správy, objektívne.
But it's very difficult not to introduce your own bias into
Ale
that.
je veľmi ťažké nezaviesť do toho náš vlastný názor, náš predpojatý názor.
5 people died in an accident.
5 zomreli ľudia pri nehode.
If I laughed,
Ak som sa smial,
if I smiled,
usmial,
if I had a fool's hat on, or I was crying,
či som plakal,
all of those
alebo som sa ako blázon
expressions
tváril.
would change the news.
Všetky tieto moje prejavy by vlastne zmenili tú správu.
If we can understand, as Victoria has just expressed, the complexity of this problem,
Ak môžeme rozumieť komplexnosti tohto problému, ako povedala práve Viktória,
as a minimum, we should have more grace,
ako
not only upon
minimum
ourselves, but upon one another.
mali by sme mať viac milosti, nielen na seba, ale jeden na druhého. Na nás samých a jeden na druhého.
Just want to add one more point.
Chcem pridať ešte jednu pointu.
A combination of Victoria's comment and my manipulating what she said.
Ja som tak trochu zmanipuloval to, čo ona povedala, ten Viktorín komentár.
She spoke about a leader giving the news and then we interpreting what that meant.
Hovorila o tom, že vodca vlastne dá tie správy a my to potom interpretujeme, že čo to znamená.
But you've got to know that the news that the leader gave is not news.
Ale mali by ste vedieť, že tie správy, ktoré ten vodca dal, to nie
The
sú
news is
správy.
Russia invaded Ukraine. Or
Správy
attacked
sú,
it.
že Rusko napadlo Ukrajinu.
When we talk about it, when that leader speaks about it,
Keď ten vodca o tom hovorí,
they're not giving news.
oni nedávajú správy.
They're telling you what that means,
Oni vám povedia, čo tie správy znamenajú.
which means they're giving an opinion.
Čiže oni dávajú názor.
And then we're going to take that and we say, teach the same message as the leader did.
A my to potom vezmeme a povieme, uč to posolstvo ako ten vodca.
And then we're going to superimpose our opinion on top of that.
A potom ešte vlastne návrh na to natlačíme ten náš názor.
And you can quickly see that we can get into a mess.
A uvidíme, že veľmi rýchlo sa dostaneme do chaosu.
Because how do you know that leader's opinion of the war in Ukraine is even correct?
Ako viete, že názor toho vodcu na vojnu v Ukrajine je správny?
It's all based upon somebody's understanding or interpretation of the Bible.
Všetko je to založené na niekoho porozumení a interpretácii
Which
Biblie,
99% of Christianity would never agree with.
čím by 99% kresťanstva nikdy nesúhlasilo.
Victoria.
Viktória.
So this is about methodology.
Takže toto je o metodológii.
So the simple answer is yes.
Áno, to je jednoduchá odpoveď.
Well, I guess that's my thought was like, isn't that how we figure out what is truth? Because if you have the correct methodology, then it should lead you to the truth.
So Victoria said, that's what we do.
Viktória hovorí, to je to, čo robíme.
And if you use the correct methodology, it should bring you to the truth.
A keď používate správnu metodológiu, malo by vás to priviesť ku pravde.
Simple answer is yes.
Jednoduchá odpoveď je áno.
I don't know if you've tried it before.
Neviem, či ste to predtým skúšali.
I have,
Ja áno.
and I hope you have.
Dúfam, že aj vy.
In my experience, methodology is more of an art than a science.
Moja skúsenosť je, že metodológia je skôr umenie ako veda.
It's not like addition and subtraction,
To nie je ako sčítavanie a odčítavanie,
although that's how we portray it.
aj keď to tak prezentujeme.
Because if it was that simple, I'd just say, here's Miller's rules, go forth and prosper.
Keby to bolo také jednoduché, tak by sme mohli len povedať, zober si pravidlá Williama Millera, choď a prosperuj.
And it's not that you don't understand English. Most people have a clueless of what you do with those rules and how you begin to apply them.
A to nie je len to, že by sme nerozumeli angličtine, ale väčšina ľudí vlastne nevie, ako používať tieto pravidlá, ako zaaplikovať.
So I agree with you. It's about using the correct methodology.
Ale súhlasím, je to používanie správnej metodológie.
But I, for one, am a work in progress when it comes to that.
Ale ja sám som vlastne v takom pracovnom
Would it scare you
postupe, keď na to
to
príde.
think
Vyplašilo by vás rozmýšľať,
that,
alebo si myslieť,
I say me,
že poviem ja,
could be teaching you something for 5 years based upon rock solid methodology,
že niečo ja vás učím 5 rokov na takej pevnej metodológii, pevnej ako skala.
you all buy into it,
Všetci to príjmete,
and I
akceptujete.
said, oh, by the way,
Potom poviem, viete čo, mimochodom,
my methodology hasn't changed.
moja metodológia sa nezmenila.
I haven't got some super new understanding of rule 7.
Mám nejaké nové porozumenie pravidla 7,
But everything that I taught you over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years actually is wrong. I want to teach you something else.
Všetko, čo som vás učil za posledných 5, 10, 15 rokov je vlastne nesprávne. Idem vás teraz učiť niečo iné.
What do you do now?
Teraz čo urobíte?
Literally, what do you do now? This is not a make-up story. This is a real life.
Toto som si nevymyslel, toto je skutočný život.
What did you do, Samira?
Čo by si spravil?
What did you do when I did that to you? Okay,
Povieš si OK?
that's honestly what you did, of course.
Naozaj, toto je úprimné, to, čo si urobila.
So there's an English word. I don't know if it's what the American translation is.
Je na to anglické slovo, neviem, jak sa to po americké angličtine povie.
That's bonkers.
Bonk.
And you all did it.
Mhm.
I was talking about Sunday law for a long time.
Ja som hovorila o nedeľnom zákone dlho.
Elder Tess said, I'll use their methodology,
Staršia Tess povedala, no, ja zoberiem tu ich metodológiu,
weaponize it,
urobím z toho zbraň,
consolidate and strengthen it,
posilním to, troška to tak upevním,
because I'm better than them.
som lepšia ako oni.
And by the way, it's not Sunday law, it's equality.
A len tak mimochodom, nie je to nedeľný zákon, je to rovnosť.
And I say, oh yeah, of course.
A ja poviem, no jasné, samozrejme,
Same methodology, but we'll just swap it to equality. It's all good.
to
We're all
je tá istá
friends.
metodológia, ale proste je to rovnosť a sme ďalej kamaráti.
And you accept it, hook, line, and sinker.
To viete takto jednoducho prijať?
It's going back to the salmon model. Explain yourselves,
Vysvetlite to,
because I can't.
lebo ja to neviem vysvetliť.
Victoria, you had your hand up. Okay, Phil.
Well, we're relatively new in the movement.
You're saved from all that damage that I did.
Všetku tú škodu, čo som urobil, to ťa uchránilo.
Just to share my joke.
No, to bol iba vtip.
No, because I'm smiling because I have reviewed many of the old ones. And the Sunday law, there are some that Sunday law is still the privacy Sunday Sabbath issue.
So Phil has said even though he's relatively new in the movement,
Aj keď je to, ona je celkom nová v hnutí, alebo on,
he's watched plenty of my presentations and others that talk about the Sunday law as the great test.
sledoval mnoho mojich prezentácií, kde som hovoril o nedeľnom zákone ako o tej veľkej skúške.
And also the other one is the 45th president, the last president.
Oh, the other one is the last president study, Donald Trump,
Potom tam bola tá štúdia posledného prezidenta o Donaldovi Trumpovi.
which is still good, by the way.
A je ešte stále dobrá, mimochodom.
Carry on.
So since I don't know enough, I don't discard them.
So even because Phil doesn't know enough, he doesn't discard those studies.
On ešte toho nevie dostatočne, ale tieto štúdie
He
neodsudzuje.
keeps them hidden in the closet in the back of his mind.
Ale si ich tak ako keby schoval niekde dozadu do skrine vo
The
svojej
best place
hlave.
to keep trash.
To je najlepšie miesto, kam si dávať nejaký odpad.
My experience so far has been with more studies, with more analyzing, answer will come.
So we,
Don't discard them.
so with more study, with more analyzing, what will come?
Answer.
Answers will come.
Že viac študovaním a analyzovaním príde viac odpovedí.
Okay, so I just want to give another perspective.
Chcem dať ďalšiu perspektívu.
All these folks,
Všetci títo tu.
they all spun this story about, I think they're called Levites or something.
Oni mali nejaký príbeh o Levitoch.
And I said, I don't see any Levites anywhere.
A ja som hovoril, ja nikde nevidím žiadnych Levitov.
And I'm using the same methodology as everyone else does.
A používam tú istú metodológiu ako ostatní.
And you know what people said to me?
A viete, čo mi ľudia povedali?
They didn't say, oh, we'll put it in the closet, back out the way, or whatever.
Nepovedali, dám to troška bokom, niekde do skrine vzadu v mojej hlave.
I got cancelled.
Mňa zrušili.
I did.
Naozaj.
It's taken me a year to get some credibility, some traction going.
Trvalo mi to rok, kým som znova získal dôveryhodnosť.
I had to fight against the system
Musel som bojovať proti tomu systému,
because I challenged authority.
lebo som dal výzvu autorite.
So I just wanted you to let you know it's not easy.
Chcem, aby ste vedeli, že nie je to jednoduché.
Even I get cancelled
Aj mňa zrušili.
in proxy.
To bolo zástupné.
Samaria, you had your hand up?
Samaria?
Emmanuel?
Emanuel?
I accept them because I'm using the same methodology to accept them.
So Emmanuel said he accepts them because he's using the same methodology.
On hovorí, že on to príjma, lebo je to tá istá metodológia.
And I like that answer
Táto odpoveď sa mi páči,
because I keep on changing my answers on the same methodology,
lebo mňa tiež stále mení moje odpovede a používam tú istú metodológiu.
which I think is a definition of insanity or something.
Nie je to definícia bláznostva?
Kathy?
So if when Tess came along and said, you know, this Sunday law is not the issue, it's equality.
So when Elder Tess came along and said the test is equality, not the Sunday law,
Keď prišla staršia téza, povedala, skúška je rovnosť a nie nedeľný zákon.
I accepted it and said, okay, I'll go along.
and I accepted it and I said, sounds good to me, I'll go along.
A ja som to povedala, ja to príjmam, znie to dobre.
Why do you question us?
So I'm getting attacked now. I said, like, why am I picking on you folks when I do the same thing?
A teraz mi hovorí, a prečo ja niečo vravím vám, keď ty robíš tú istú vec?
And I completely agree with what you've just said.
Ja úplne súhlasím s tým, čo si teraz povedala.
If I use the word hypocrisy, my hypocrisy is worse than yours.
Keď sme použili slovo pokrytectvo, tak to moje pokrytectvo je
Although it's
horšie
not
ako
hypocrisy.
vaše. Ale nie je to pokrytectvo.
Maybe we might call it grace
Môžeme to nazvať milosť
or humility.
alebo poniženosť.
We could, however we want to see it without putting a moral compass on it.
Akokoľvek to chceme vidieť bez toho, aby sme tomu dali nejaký morálny kompas.
I hope that me,
Dúfam, že ja,
that I'm willing to go where the truth leads.
som ochotný ísť tam, kam vedie pravda.
And even though when I talk about you, I put it in a negative perspective,
Som hovoril o vás, dal som to do negatívnej perspektívy.
What I really want to do is to make you think about why you do what you do.
Ale ja len chcem, aby ste naozaj porozmýšľali o tom, že prečo robíte to, čo robíte.
Because like Fel, I have those closets at the back of my mind.
Tak ako Fel, a ja som rôzne veci dal do skrine dozadu v mojej mysli.
I've always had them.
Vždy som ich mal.
And it can take me years before either I work out what the problem is,
A môže mi to trvať roky, dokiaľ vlastne na to prídem, že kde je problém.
and then I'm brave enough to put my head above the parapet and be willing to get attacked.
A potom musím byť odvážny na to, aby som vystrčil svoju hlavu a bol ochotný vystaviť sa útoku.
Not because I know the truth, but because I feel convicted enough to share my thoughts and ideas.
Nie preto, že by som poznal pravdu, a preto, že sa cítim dosť už usvedčený alebo presvedčený o tom, aby som sa zdieľal o tie moje myšlienky.
I've made this point several times, but I don't think I've made it strong enough that people get this point that I'm about to make.
Túto pointu som urobil už niekoľko krát, ale neviem, či som to urobil dostatočne jasne, silne na to, aby to ľudia pochopili.
If we say that Elder Tess is the messenger,
Ak by sme povedali, že staršia Tess je tým poslom,
without talking about numbers, not talking about numbers,
nehovoríme o číslach,
if you're willing to accept that,
ak ste ochotní toto prijať,
then you should be willing to say that Elder Jeff was also the messenger.
tak potom by ste mali byť ochotní povedať, že aj starší Jeff bol poslom.
And if you're willing to see that,
Ak ste ochotní vidieť toto,
then you would know that I am not the messenger
tak potom viete, že ja nie som posol
and never have been.
a nikdy som nebol.
Because our concept of how we understand and view those angels, or how we view leadership or teachers,
Náš koncept toho, ako rozumieme a vidíme tých
I
vodcov
think
alebo
needs some
anielov,
adjustment.
myslím, že to potrebuje nejaké úpravy.
It takes some time for us to get used to the idea that we need to view people differently to understand what their work is and their role.
Trvá nám to nejaký čas, aby sme pochopili, že musíme sa inak pozerať na ľudí, aby sme rozumeli tomu, čo je ich dielo a ich rola.
So the very point that Kathy brings up
Takže tá pointa, ktorú priniesla Kathy,
is, I'm going to say, proof
je dôkaz,
that I'm in the same place as you are,
že som na rovnakom mieste ako aj vy.
that I'm confronted with these truths,
Ja som konfrontovaný s týmito pravdami,
that like each of you,
tak ako každý z vás,
like Fel said,
tak ako aj Fel.
I have some questions which I don't understand.
Mám nejaké otázky, ktorým nerozumiem.
Using my limited understanding of methodology, what I'm hearing sounds good.
Používam moje limitované porozumenie metodológie, to, čo počujem, mi znie dobre.
And because I have a fear or self-doubt about my opinion,
Pretože mám strach alebo nejakú takú seba pochybnosť o mojom
I'm willing to
názore,
put it aside
radšej to dám nabok.
in that box at the back of my mind
Dám to zabudnúť do
and
tej
let things
krabičky.
develop.
Ale uvidím, jak sa veci vyvinú.
And give myself an opportunity to familiarize myself with the truth.
A dám si možnosť sa tak nejak so pravdou oboznámiť.
So all of that is true.
Toto všetko je pravda.
And I think that's partly about what's going on here.
Myslím, že je to z časti o tom, čo sa deje tu.
But there's another element to all of this.
Ale má to tu ešte aj ďalší element.
I don't like women with short hair.
Nepáčia sa mi ženy s krátkými vlasmi.
I find it unattractive.
Zdá sa mi to nepriťažlivé.
I don't understand the point that they're trying to make.
Nechápem tú pointu, ktorú sa snažia s tým urobiť.
And I think it's wrong, the track that we've gone down.
A myslím si, že toto je nesprávny smer, ktorým sme sa vybrali.
I'm too scared to say it,
Som príliš vystrašený to povedať,
but I feel it.
ale cítim to v sebe.
And as Alison said, I've got nowhere else to go.
Ale zároveň si uvedomujem, nemám kde inde ísť,
So I just don't say anything.
a tak nepoviem nič.
But every time I look at all of these women with short hair, it just rubs me up the wrong way.
Ale vždy, keď sa pozriem na tieto ženy s tými krátkými vlasmi, tak ma to úplne tak rozrušuje nepríjemne.
It's that class of people that I want us to think about.
O tejto skupine ľudí chcem, aby sme porozmýšľali.
In addition,
A čo pridám?
that we still may have some concepts not straightened out properly yet.
Ešte stále môžeme mať nejaké koncepty, ktoré úplne nemáme vyjasnené.
Aaron said something that I think is important.
Aaron povedal niečo, čo si myslím, že je dôležité.
He marked 2021
V marci
and I said,
2021
what's that marker?
hovorím, čo to značí?
So he said, radical feminism,
Radikálny
same-sex marriage.
feminizmus a manželstva rovnakého pohlavia.
And I've already forgotten the point that I want to make, so hopefully I remember it. Give me some other markers here.
Čo to ešte bolo? Aké sú tie ďalšie značky tu?
Okay, so this is the formalization.
To je formovanie posolstva.
And when you say the formalization is this way, Mark, what line would that be on?
Keď hovoríš,
What-
že
Group of people?
to je formovanie, to je pre ktorú skupinu ľudí, na ktorej línii to je?
1 second. You don't? You don't know? The 100, so 140, some people gave different answers.
144 000.
So someone said 144,000.
Niekto hovorí 144 000.
Someone said 144,000. So someone said it's the 144,000 and someone said the priest as well.
Niekto hovorí, že sa to týka aj kňazov.
Anyone else? So is the end of the line the same as the formalization?
Je na konci línie formovanie.
Whatever we're going to talk about is this year,
Budeme o tom hovoriť, že je to tento rok.
but when it comes to the priest, it can't be a formalization and the end of a line, can it?
Ale keď to príde ku kňazom, nemôže to byť formovanie na konci línie.
So you
však?
said yes.
Hovoríš áno?
Okay, so I'm confused now
Teraz som zmetený.
because I'm ignorant. So
Nevedomosti.
Samaria said it's also panium.
Maria hovorí, že je to aj pániu.
Aaron.
Aaron?
And Victoria are both correct.
Okay, so they're both correct.
Obe sú správne.
Two dates. You have two dates in 2021.
So there are two dates in 2021.
Sú tu dve.
One of them is the formalization on the line of the priest, 2021.
Okay, so our problem here is that 2021 is not a good marker. There's
Dobre,
two events then.
Tam sú dve udalosti. V 2021.
So it'd be 2021A and 2021B.
2021A a 2021B.
Priests in 2021 on the line, 144,000.
Jedno je pre kňazov a jedno pre
Okay, so we've got
144 000.
we can't do what we're doing here. It's not that straightforward. That's the point that we've come to.
Čiže nie je to také jasné, nemôžeme to túto robiť.
Having come this far,
Prišli sme takto ďaleko,
whether it's the formalization or the end of the line
či je to formovanie alebo koniec línie
for the priests,
pre kňazov,
or the formalization for the 144,000,
alebo formovanie pre 144 000.
this is a significant event and things begin to change after that.
Toto je významná udalosť a veci sa potom začínajú meniť.
Alison.
Wasn't race part of it as well, that time period?
So the question is race a component of this issue here?
Je rasa tiež súčasťou na tohto problému?
So Alison has asked, is race to do with this history? And I don't remember.
Čiže je rasa v týchto dejinách? Ja si nepamätám.
Unless someone has an answer to that.
Ak má niekto na to odpoveď.
Okay, so I'm not sure and other people here aren't either.
Nie som si istý, ani ľudia tu.
I just want to add, we studied with Elaine that 2021 is also the death of the priest and the resurrection of the image of the priest that you gave in the Portugal studies.
I did that?
Yeah.
Okay, it must be good then. What do you want me to write?
Takže mám tam
Priest
napísať?
and then IP.
Okay, so there's something about the priests
Takže je tu niečo o kňazoch
and the image of the priests.
a
And that was a significant
obraze
truth
kňazov.
because I said it.
A vraj to
Which I
bola
can't
významná
remember.
pravda, lebo ja som to povedala, ale ja si to nepamätám.
So if we go to the formalization,
Keď pôjdeme ku formovaniu,
can we have significant problems with the message at that
Uh,
stage?
máme v tomto, na tomto stupni veľké problémy s
Yes.
posolstvom.
Jackie?
Yeah, I believe so.
So Jackie says yes.
Jackie hovorí, že áno.
Anyone else?
Ešte niekto?
Because if you'd asked me, I would have said no chance.
Keby ste sa spýtali mňa, poviem,
Seems a bit late to
v žiadnom prípade nie je na to šanca.
repackage the truth or unlearn something and learn something new at this late stage.
Takže my zaobalíme pravdu a potom sa musíme v tomto bode niečo odúčať a zasa nové učiť.
It's still progressive even after that, Jackie says.
Ale stále je to ešte progresívne, to svetlo, hovorí Jackie.
Any other thoughts?
Ešte nejaké myšlienky?
Aaron?
So what you're tested on is meant to be the formalization.
So Aaron says we say meant to be, you mean we are or we're meant to be?
So just in any repeating pattern, what you're tested on, the last one, is meant to be the formalization, the previous.
You have to say that. I didn't understand what we were talking about. It's my ignorance.
In theory, you're always
Nerozumiem, o čom
tested
hovoríš.
on formalization.
Okay, so in theory, you're tested on the formalization.
Takže teoreticky ste formovaní, ste skúšaní na tej
Why do you say
formalizácii.
in theory? I
Hovoríš
mean, you are or you're not,
teoreticky.
or it's, I don't know what you mean in theory.
Čo ty myslíš, že
That's
teoreticky?
what we teach.
To my učíme.
Okay, so we teach that you're tested on the formalization.
Takže my učíme, že sme skúšaní.
We
Ty
teach that you're tested on the
milníku formovania.
formalization. Is that what you just said? So I have a
To je to,
question
čo ty si
then.
hovoril však. Dobre, mám otázku.
When you say we're tested on the formalization,
Keď hovoríš, že sme skúšaní na milníku formovania,
do you mean at the formalization
Myslíš pri tom formovaní?
Aaron said no.
Hovorí nie.
Do you mean that we're tested on the issue at the formalization? We're tested on these
Alebo sme o tej
these
téme
topics. Is that
skúšaní
what
pri
you mean?
téme formovania?
Okay, so we get to a formalization.
Takže prídeme k formovaniu.
Some truth comes to the surface
Príde nejaká pravda na povrch
and we're tested on it.
a sme ohľadne toho skúšaní.
Okay, and carrying with the point you're making.
A pointa, ktorú robíš,
So we teach,
my učíme,
You can't change things after the formalization.
so based upon that logic,
na základe tejto logiky,
the formalization,
formovanie,
some information comes to light,
príde nejaká informácia ku svetlu,
which we're tested
svetlo.
upon,
na tom sme skúšaní.
and based upon that logic,
A na základe tejto logiky
it can't change. Is that what you said?
sa to nemôže zmeniť.
Aaron said it can't change.
Aaron hovorí, že sa to nemôže zmeniť.
And the only reason things can't change,
A dôvod, prečo sa to nemôže zmeniť,
in theory,
teoreticky,
is because they're correct.
je, že je to správne.
Otherwise, they'd be changeable.
Ináč by sa to dalo zmeniť.
Within that dispensation, it's a repeat.
I'm just going to just say I didn't understand what Aaron said.
Nerozumel som, čo Aaron povedal, som chcel povedať.
Unless you said something significant that I missed.
Pokiaľ nehovoríš niečo
Okay.
významné, čo by mi uniklo,
That was like just waffling. Call that in England. So if you're tested on this thing at the formalization,
Takže ak ste na tomto tu skúšaní, na formovaní,
are you tested before the formalization? So
Si
was there
skúšaný
increase of
pred
knowledge? What happens at the increase of
formovaním?
knowledge? Some truth comes out
ty hovoríš, že už vlastne pri
And
tom
you
raste
tested on that,
poznania, že
presumably?
príde niečo, nejaká pravda a my sme na to skúšaní ohľadom tej pravdy.
well, if an increase of knowledge comes, you have to accept it or not accept it. It means it's a test.
Keď príde rast poznania, musíte to buď prijať alebo neprijať, čiže je to
So
skúšanie.
Aaron agreed with that.
S tým Aaron súhlasí.
Is that truth subject to change?
Je táto pravda subjektom zmeny? Môže sa ešte
Okay, so
zmeniť?
Aaron's going to say no,
Aaron povie nie,
because it's in the wording, it says knowledge.
nie, lebo tam sa píše o poznaní, alebo ten pojem je
Which in an
poznanie,
English dictionary means truth.
čiže to podľa slovníka znamená pravda. A podľa anglického.
Not really.
No nie naozaj.
So at the increase of knowledge, there's no mistake,
Pri raste poznania tam nie je chyba.
but there's more information to come.
Ale je stále ešte viac informácií, ktoré prídu.
But that doesn't make it wrong.
Ale to nerobí tú pravdu nesprávnou.
Aaron didn't say this, so this is a question.
To Aaron nepovedal, takže to sa ja pýtam.
Increase of knowledge, a truth comes out, you're tested on it, and it's the truth.
Rast poznania, príde pravda a sme na ňu skúšaní
But it's not properly developed
o
yet.
tej pravde, ale ešte nie je úplne rozvinutá.
Is that correct?
Je to správne?
So everybody has either said yes or they've not objected.
Čiže ľudia proti tomuto
So the
neprotestujú.
formalization
Formovanie
is not an increase of knowledge, it's a completion of knowledge, if I can perhaps put it that way.
nie je rast poznania, je to ako keby také dokonanie toho poznania, také
This is a
zabalenie.
question.
To je otázka.
The knowledge is now complete,
Čiže keď to poznanie je úplné,
which means it can't be different,
to znamená, že už nemôže byť iné,
but there's added information now which consolidates or makes the thing whole.
ale je tu pridaná
formalized.
informácia, ktorá robí tú vec celistvou. To je formovanie.
and you're tested on it and it has to be the truth.
A sme ohľadne toho skúšaní a musí to byť pravda.
Okay, any comments? Victoria, you have a comment?
Ešte nejaké komentáre?
Based on what we know.
Go ahead.
Based on what we know, because there isn't any information that has been unsealed.
So Victoria said it's based upon what we know
Je to založené na tom, čo vieme,
because there's
poznáme,
nothing new unsealed.
lebo to vlastne nie je nič nové, čo je odpečatené.
So after the formalization, can something more be unsealed?
Môže byť po formovaní ešte niečo ďalšie odpečatené?
What's the waymark that comes after the formalization?
Aký milník prichádza po formovaní?
On the generic line, what would come after formalization?
Na tej takej
So
bežnej
can I
línii.
just call it the end? Or is it not the
Koniec?
end?
To nie je koniec.
Yeah? You said close of probation.
Záver milosti.
So is that the end of the line?
Je to koniec línie?
Okay, because now I'm confusing my own mind.
Okay.
So basically,
I don't want to call it second advent.
Chce
Do we
sa
agree there's
nazvať druhý
five
príchod?
lines, 5 waymarks on the line? Tell me which number formalization is.
Formovanie je kde?
Formalization is none of them. Okay, so
Na
tell me where
žiadnom z
formalization
týchto.
would go.
so it would be in between one dispensation. So the repeating pattern. Formalization. Yeah.
Takže tu by bolo
This is the end.
formovanie. Tu je koniec.
Okay. Anybody got any thought, comment?
Ešte máte nejaké myšlienky?
Aaron.
So strictly speaking, it's not the end, it's the test.
Okay, so we want to call it the test. And what happens after that?
Toto je skúška. Čo sa deje potom?
Hence the repeating pattern.
Okay, but does the line never end?
A tá línia nikdy neskončí?
Because that's that one. If you want, I don't.
No, because then you go to a different line, 144,000, which goes all the way to the real second advent,
Sure.
still getting repeating patterns there.
But if you've got repeating patterns, that means it's a repeat of something that's already ended. Or
Keď máme opakujúce sa vzorce, tak sa opakuje niečo, čo už skončilo.
okay, so if I wanted to repeat this here,
Keby som chcel toto tu opakovať sem,
yeah, you can't call this the beginning then.
to
I
nazveme
can call this the
začiatok,
beginning, but I can't call that the end.
a potom toto nemôže byť koniec.
You said I could.
Povedal, že môžem to tak spraviť.
I just said, could you call that the beginning? You said yes.
Ja som sa ťa
It's all
spýtal,
been
môžem to
recorded.
nazvať začiatok a ty si povedal, že áno.
Okay, so I'm sorry for our online people here.
Trošku teraz sa ospravedlňujem tým ľuďom, čo sú online.
We just want to call that the test,
Nazveme to skúškou,
but we don't want to call it the end of something.
ale nie je to koniec niečoho.
And we don't want to call that the beginning of something, even though it repeats.
Ani to nenazveme začiatok niečoho, aj keď sa to opakuje.
If we call it the beginning of the repeat, that particular repeating pattern, and the end of that particular repeating pattern, but then you can't say nothing happens after it because it's the end. That's the problem with calling it the end. You have to, can't say nothing happens after it.
So Aaron says, if we call this the end, we can't because something happens after that.
Nemôžeme to nazvať koniec, lebo niečo sa stane ešte za tým.
And that's why we couldn't call this the beginning because something happened before that. So it wasn't the beginning.
Unless you
A nemôžeme to nazvať ani začiatok, lebo niečo sa stalo predtým.
have to explain that whole concept.
Takže to
So
nemohlo
Aaron
byť
says you can do
začiatok.
it if you explain it.
Ale dá sa to spraviť, ak to vysvetlíme.
So I'll explain it.
Dobre, ja som to už vysvetlil.
I don't want to talk about a repeating pattern.
Nechcem hovoriť o opakujúcich sa vzorcoch.
And I don't want to talk about what happened before,
A nechcem hovoriť o tom, čo sa stalo predtým.
even though I knew that it did and it will.
Aj keď viem, že sa stalo, aj sa stane.
So why can't I just call that the beginning of this dispensation and the end of this
Prečo
dispensation?
nemôžem tu nazvať začiatok tejto epochy a koniec tejto epochy?
Good. Okay. So I win eventually.
Konečne som vyhral.
It's the end.
Toto je koniec.
And the one that comes just before the end.
A toto, čo
is the
príde pred tým
formalization.
koncom, je formovanie.
Okay. Now you're not going to put some more waymarks in there for me, are you?
Tu už nedáme žiadne
If there's not
milníky,
going to be
že?
any more, if there's not going to be any more waymarks,
Keď nie je viacej
Aaron
milníkov,
said,
Aaron hovorí,
you can't have any more unsealing after that.
tak potom už nemôže byť ďalšie odpečateľanie.
And Victoria said, of course you can.
Viktória povedala, samozrejme, že môže tam byť.
So I'm confused.
Tak teraz som
Aaron.
zmetený.
Both right.
As always, the methodology teaches that everybody's correct.
Metodológia nás učí, že každý má pravdu.
Because
Lebo
Someone taught me. It depends.
niekto povedal mne,
okay, so it depends.
takže všetko závisí.
Now you know why I have this problem with this methodology stuff.
Takže teraz vidíte, prečo mám problém s tou metodológiou.
If no one can explain it to me, let someone else.
Nikto to ani nevie vysvetliť mne, nie ešte ja nikomu
Explain,
ďalšiemu.
Aaron, it depends upon what?
Tak Aaron vysvetlí, závisí to na čom.
This is what I was trying to explain earlier, and you just called it waffling.
So Aaron tried to explain something and I cancelled him.
On sa snažil niečo predtým vysvetliť a ja som ho zrušil.
Because in the first repeating pattern, we say King of the South is dead.
V tom prvom
So Aaron
opakujúcom
says
sa
in the first
vzorci
repeating pattern, we say the King of the South is
sme
dead.
povedali, že kráľ Juhu je mŕtvý.
At the formalization,
Pri tom formovaní.
I don't know what you're talking about, by the way.
Inak
Jackie
ja
doesn't either.
Neviem, o čom
We're-
hovoríš.
Future.
And in the future,
A v budúcnosti,
in the future repeating pattern,
v tom ďalšom opakujúcom sa vzorci,
We say the King of the South is going to resurrect. It's,
sme povedali, že kráľ Juhu bude vzkriesený.
die its final day.
so Aaron just told me something. I don't understand what he's saying, but because I don't understand the point that you're making. Sorry.
Nerozumiem tej pointe, ktorú sa snažíš povedať.
First formalization, it was correct. The King of the South died.
Is that like one that was that back here somewhere?
Yeah, 1996.
Tej prvej,
There was one here,
v
the King of the South
formovaní
died.
zomrel kráľ Juhu a vtedy sme povedali, že on vlastne
Elder
zomrel.
Test says that was wrong.
Let me make, if I understand what Aaron is saying, he's saying this.
Ak rozumiem správne, čo Aaron hovorí, hovorí toto.
There was a dispensation back in the day,
Tuto bola epocha kedysi.
so this is the dispensation and there's a formalization here.
Tu je formovanie
And something happened then.
a niečo sa tu stalo.
And whatever happened then,
Čokoľvek sa stalo,
in a future dispensation, something different can happen.
v budúcej epoche niečo iné sa môže stať.
Is that what you're saying?
To je to, čo hovoríš?
He said yes.
Hovorí, že áno.
So I agree with that.
Nesúhlasím.
But
Ale
I could be wrong.
môžem sa myliť.
I'm not going to different dispensations or repeating patterns.
Ja teraz nejdem do rôznych opakujúcich sa vzorcov a iných epoch.
I'm in a single line,
Som na jednoduchej línii,
which is a single dispensation,
jedna epocha.
and I could be wrong in my methodology, and I'm willing to accept it wrong, but you can cut everything out.
Môžem sa myliť a môžete mi to povedať, ale vy môžete všetko ostatné
You get
odtiaľ
lines
odrezať.
and you can cut them.
Tie línie môžeme prestrihnúť.
And then when you cut them and put them underneath each other, you get these repeating patterns.
Keď
They're on
ich,
their own, they stand.
keď ich predelíte a dáte jedno po druhé, tak nájdete tie opakujúce sa vzorce.
Because in this line, there's no
Oni obstoja
repeat.
same o sebe, lebo v tejto línii tu nie je žiadne opakovanie.
If I did this and I cut that and put that underneath, I can get repeats. I get that.
Ak by som toto odrezal a dal to jedno po druhé, tak nájdem opakovanie sa, áno.
Unless I'm missing something fundamental, which I could be.
Pokiaľ to nie je tak, že by mi niečo základné chýbalo.
I'm missing one point.
Chýba mi nejaká pointa.
2021 is the formalization.
21 is the formalization.
Tak 21. rok je formovanie.
Sunday law test.
So this is the Sunday law.
A toto je nedeľný zákon.
On any particular line, wherever the name is,
Teraz na akékoľvek línii.
when I fractalize this,
Keď toto dám do fraktálu,
Two more waymarks in between 21 and Sunday law.
so that's why I asked
tak
ages
nájdeme
ago,
ešte
we're going to do
ďalšie
this.
dva milníky
Can't do that the way
medzi
before.
21. a
That's why I
nedeľným
said no.
zákonom.
But you can do it when you use a fractal, which is a different line. And so that's why. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. So we can fractalize this and we can get two waymarks, but not the way I'm drawing it.
Toto môžeme
It's
spraviť
the way I've done it is
fraktál a
wrong.
dáme sem
Can
ďalšie
someone
dva
put
milníky.
your hand up if you know, in the last 10 minutes, you know what we're talking about. Put your hand up if you know what we're talking about.
Dvihnite ruky, ak ste za
This
posledných 10 minút
fractalizing and what
rozumeli,
you can and can't do,
čomu
how
hovoríme.
lines work. So
O čom
about,
hovoríme.
half the people know. Put your hands up if you don't understand what's going on.
Asi polovica ľudí rozumela, čo robíme. Kto nerozumel, ruku
Okay.
hore.
Me and my merry band of conspirators don't actually understand what's going on.
Ja a ešte títo ďalšie nerozumieme, čo sme robili.
I do and I don't understand. And you can't just say, yeah, I completely understand, or no, I don't understand. I do understand some, and I get lost.
So Susan said the problem is I have bad questions.
Susan
Which I
hovorí,
think
že
is
môj
true.
problém je, že dávam zlé otázky. No to si myslím, že to je pravda.
Okay. So let me just get this. Let me just get this clear then, so it's clear in my mind.
Skúsim to troška vyjasniť.
After the formalization,
Po formovaní,
which is a truth that is open to change or not open to change.
čo je pravda, ktorá je otvorená alebo nie je otvorená zmene,
So it's open to change. So we're going to be tested on something that may not even be correct.
takže je otvorená zmene. To znamená, že budeme skúšaní na niečo, čo ani nemusí byť pravda.
Just as a simple question, what's the point of being tested on something that you don't even know is truth?
To je jednoduchá otázka. Aká je pointa v tom, že ste na niečom skúšaní, keď ani neviete, či je to pravda?
I think there'll be more knowledge to the formalization, but there's no change.
So Gloria says there's no change.
Gloria hovorí, že
add some
nie
extra
je
bits
tu
in, but
žiadna
there's no
zmena.
change.
Prídu tam nejaké veci navyše, ale nie je to zmena.
Well,
Not only dispensation, but in the context of what's being studied. So for in that context, in that dispensation, in my mind, as far as I know, it is truth for that time.
okay, so Phil says it's truth for that time
Takže je to pravda pre ten
and it's
čas.
subject to change.
Môže sa to ešte zmeniť?
That's why I said to our earlier discussion about keeping things in the back of my mind, because it could be truth for that time, for that knowledge. When more light comes,
That's my question. If it's truth for 2021,
Čiže je toto pravda pre 2021?
you say it might not be the truth for 2023.
A ty hovoríš, že to nemusí byť pravda
Before the
pre
Sunday, it might not be true
2023.
now.
Za nedeľným zákonom už to nemusí byť pravda.
for that truth. Like, for example, the last president,
The last president isn't here. The last president is down there.
Right,
S
and
posledným
it was from
prezidentom
that
to bolo
time.
tam ďalej skôr.
The point I want to make is this discussion is not about that time, it's about this time. It's this dispensation.
To pointa je, že ja nechcem teraz diskutovať
Can we say in this
o tom, čo bolo vtedy,
dispensation,
ale o tejto epoche.
at the formalization, which is this subject here, there's something wrong here that needs adjusting before you get to the Sunday law.
Je tu niečo,
That's what my question was.
moja otázka je, či tu
It's not about after the Sunday law and
je
before the
niečo
Sunday law.
nesprávne,
And some people think
čo
can't be, and
musí,
some people saying, of course it can be.
je tu niečo, čo tu musí byť opravené pred nedeľným zákonom a niektorí hovoria, že nemôže to tak byť a
And we've run out
niektorí
of time.
hovoria, že môže. Ale čas nám už
So,
vypršal.
For everybody online,
Takže
we're
všetci,
going to
čo
carry
ste
this
online.
discussion through the rest of our day, and you're going to miss out. You should have got your tickets and come.
My sa budeme teraz tu o tom baviť zbytok dňa. Vy
A
ste
vy-
si mali kúpiť lístky a prísť sem.
And before we leave, we're going to, Aaron just wants to make a point because it's an
Predtým, ako
important
to
thing that we need to
uzavrieme,
clarify
tak
before we end.
Aaron ešte chce urobiť jednu pointu.
The Sunday law in 2014, were they right or wrong?
So, someone in this dispensation back here,
Niekto tu v tejto epoche tu,
what date would that be?
That would be
aký je to
9/11.
dátum?
So that would be 2001, and that would be
2001 a toto?
that would be 2014, and that would be
2014
12.
a toto?
So someone back here,
Takže
in
niekto tu
12,
v 2012
said that there's going
Povedal.
to be a Sunday law in 2014.
že bude v 2014 nedeľný zákon.
And your point is?
Tvoja pointa je,
Aaron said the point is, were they right or wrong?
bola to pravda, či nebola to pravda?
And my response to Aaron's question
Moja odpoveď na Aaronovú otázku
is this.
je táto.
From 12 to 14,
Od 2012 do 14,
from the formalization, and I know you don't like it, I'm going to say to the end,
od formovania až po koniec, viem, že to sa vám nepáči,
there was no development or change of the message. It was fixed.
nebol žiadny vývoj alebo zmena posolstiev, bolo to
And the only
fixné.
point, and I could be wrong on this because I think people are saying that I'm wrong, which is fine.
Možno, že sa v tomto milím, ľudia hovoria, že to je zlé, že to je v
I don't care what
poriadku.
happens afterwards
To ma nezaujíma, čo sa stane potom,
because I've come to the end.
lebo som prišiel ku koncu.
And I know for a fact that from the formalization to the end, there was no development, no change in the message. It was fixed.
A viem určite, že od formovania nakoniec už nebol vývoj posolstva, bolo to
And my question
zafixované.
is,
A moja otázka je,
from 2021
od
to the Sunday
2021
law,
až po nedeľný zákon,
that's what I've got here,
to je to, čo mám tu,
the test, the Sunday law, the end, it's the same thing, I think.
skúška, nedeľný zákon, koniec, to je to isté.
It's the same as this pattern.
To je taký istý
Do we have an
vzorec.
opportunity to say, we're going to change something?
Máme nejakú možnosť, že tuto ideme niečo zmeniť?
That's my question.
To je moja otázka.
And if the answer is no,
A ak tá odpoveď je
you
nie,
enemies, what are you complaining about?
vy nepriatelia, čo sa sťažujete?
Why have you got questions?
Prečo máte otázky?
Why have you got nagging doubts?
Prečo máte také otravné pochybnosti?
Because nothing can change.
Nič sa nemôže zmeniť.
For the rest of you,
Vy ostatní,
what would happen if you found out that something would change?
čo by sa stalo, ak by ste zistili, že niečo by sa zmenilo?
Someone said something?
Niekto niečo
There would
povedal?
be chaos.
Bol by chaos.
And chaos is a crisis.
A to je kríza.
And a crisis is a shaking.
A to je triebenie. Kríza je triebenie.
Let's pray.
Poďme sa pomodliť.
Holy God, we thank you for your watch care over us.
Svätý Bože, ďakujeme ti za tvoju starostlivosť o nás.
We pray that in our frail humanity,
Modlíme sa, že v našej slabej ľudskosti
in the weakness of our minds,
a v slabosti našej mysle
and the passions of our hearts,
a túžob nášho srdca,
that you would continue to be merciful upon us.
aby si bol s nami naďalej milostivý.
Breathe upon us the breath of life.
Dýchni na nás dých života.
May the Holy Spirit infuse around us and within us goodness,
Nech Duch Svätý do nás dýchne dobrotu
and humility.
a pokoru, poniženosť.
May we learn to have grace for one another.
Nech sa naučíme mať milosť jeden s druhým.
As we handle the most momentous truths that have confronted humanity.
Keď sa vysporiadávame s tými najvážnejšími pravdami, ktoré konfrontovali ľudstvo.
It is our responsibility to bring the great controversy to an end.
Je naša zodpovednosť priviesť veľký spor k záveru.
May we understand our responsibility,
Nech rozumieme tejto zodpovednosti.
and may it mold and change our lives,
Nech to zmení a sformuje naše životy.
that rather than being an enemy within the gate,
Radšej, aby sme boli nepriateľom v bránach,
that together
spolu,
in unity,
aby sme boli v jednote.
we would resist or repel the enemy that's outside.
Aby sme mohli toho nepriateľa, ktorý je vonku, vypudiť a
In Jesus'
pokarhať
name, amen.
v mene Ježiša. Amen.